Hello and welcome to my podcast. I'm Alden Carrow, author of Cumbria in verse, Lakes to Fells in poetry. This show is about slowing down, listening closely, and discovering the poetry that lives in both the extraordinary and the everyday. Each episode, I begin with a guest poem, something from the wider world of poetry that has inspired me or continues to resonate. Then I'll share one of my own pieces. After that, I will discuss using Instagram to promote poetry books. Then finally, I will invite you, the listeners, to email me future guest poem suggestions to read out on my show. Today, we're venturing into high altitudes and deep time. We're exploring the tension between the things we build, our structures, our art, our expectations, and the raw, unbothered forces of geology and hydrology that operate beneath and around us. For our guest poem, I wanted to select a piece that captures the absolute indifference of nature, that terrifyingly beautiful concept we call the sublime. When we talk about the sublime in poetry, we're not talking about something merely pretty or picturesque. We're talking about awe mixed with terror, the feeling of standing before a storm or a massive mountain range and realizing how small, how fragile, and how temporary we truly are. To explore this, I've chosen Percy Bysshe Shelley's monumental work, Mont Blanc. Written in 1816 during a visit to the Chamonix Valley, this poem is a philosophical inquiry into the relationship between the human mind and the external universe. But more than that, it's a poem about force. It is about the everlasting universe of things that flows through the mind like a rapid river. It deals with glaciers, with granite, with the unsculpted power of the earth. In the context of our theme today, the tension between the natural and the imposed, Shelley presents nature not as a garden to be tended, but as a relentless hydraulic and geological machine that operates whether we are watching it or not. It's the ultimate elegy for wildness, acknowledging a power that dwarfs all human endeavour. Before I read this, I want you to close your eyes and imagine the setting. We're not in the gentle, rolling hills of the English countryside here. We're in the Alps. Below us is the ravine of Arve. It's a place of violence and dark, deep colour. Shelley looks at this landscape and sees a physical manifestation of power with a capital P. He sees the water rushing, the rocks tumbling, the glacier creeping like a slow snake of ice. He realises that this force is the source of everything, yet it is separate from human morality or desire. Listen to how he describes the river and the ravine. Listen for the dizzy ravine and the ceaseless motion. He suggests that the wildness of the mountain is a mirror for the wildness of the human imagination, but it's a mirror that can shatter us. In today's episode, we're thinking about entropy and reclamation, how nature takes things back. In Mont Blanc, nature has not even let humanity in the door yet. It's primal, it's dark deep. Here is Percy Bysshe Shelley's Mont Blanc. The everlasting universe of things flows through the mind and rolls its rapid waves, now dark, now glittering, now reflecting gloom, now lending splendour, where from secret springs the source of human's thoughts its tribute brings. Of waters with a sound but half its own, such as a feeble brook will oft assume. In the wild woods, among the mountains lone, where waterfalls around it leap forever, where woods and winds contend, and a vast river over its rocks ceaselessly bursts and raves. Thus, thou ravine of Arve, dark deep ravine, thou many-coloured, many-voiced vale, over whose pines and crags and caverns sail fast cloud shadows and sunbeams, awful sea, where power in lightness of the Arve comes down from the icicles that gird his secret throne, bursting through these dark mountains like the flame of lightning through the tempest. Thou dost lie, thy giant brood of pines around thee clinging, children of elder time, in whose devotion the chainless winds still come and ever came to drink their odours, and their mighty swinging to hear an old and solemn harmony. Thine earthly rainbows stretched across the sweep of the ethereal waterfall, whose veil robes some unsculptured image, the strange sleep, which when the voices of the desert fail, wraps all in its own deep eternity, thy caverns echoing to the Arve's commotion, a loud, lone sound no other sound can tame. Thou art pervaded with that ceaseless motion. Thou art the path of that unresting sound, dizzy ravine, and when I gaze on thee, I seem as in a trance sublime and strange, to muse on my own separate fantasy, my human mind, which passively now renders and receives fast influencings, holding an unremitting interchange with the clear universe of things around, one legion of wild thoughts, whose wandering wings now float above thy darkness, and now rest, where that or thou art no unbidden guest, in the still cave of the witch Posy. Seeking among the shadows that pass by, ghosts of all things that are, some shade of thee, some phantom, some faint image, till the breast from which they fled recalls them, thou art there. Some say that gleams of a remoter world visit the soul in sleep, that death is slumber, and that its shapes the busy thoughts outnumber of those who wake and live. I look on high. Has some unknown omnipotence unfurled the veil of life and death? Or do I lie in dream, and does the mightier world of sleep spread far around and inaccessibly its circles? For the very spirit fails, driven like a homeless cloud from steep to steep, that vanishes among the viewless gales. Far, far above, piercing the infinite sky, Mont Blanc appears, still snowy and serene. Its subjects, mountains, their unearthly forms, pile around it ice and rock. Broad vales between of frozen unfathomable deeps, blue as the overhanging heaven, that spread and wind among the accumulated steeps, a desert peopled by the storms alone, save when the eagle brings some hunter's bone, and the wolf tracks her there. How hideously its shapes are heaped around, rude, bare, and high, ghastly and scarred and riven. Is this the scene where the old earthquake daemon taught her young ruin? Were these their toys, or did a sea of fire envelop once this silent snow? None can reply. All seems eternal now. The wilderness has a mysterious tongue which teaches awful doubt, or faith so mild, so solemn, so serene, that man may be, but for such faith, with nature reconciled. Thou hast a voice, great mountain, to repeal large codes of fraud and woe, not understood by all, but which the wise and great and good interpret, or make felt, or deeply feel. The fields, the lakes, the forests and the streams, ocean and all the living things that dwell within the daedal earth, lightning and rain, earthquake and fiery flood and hurricane, the torpor of the year when feeble dreams visit the hidden buds, or dreamless sleep holds every future leaf and flower. the bound with which from that detested trance they leap, the works and ways of man, their death and birth, and that of him and all that his may be. All things that move and breathe with toil and sound are born and die, revolve, subside and swell. Power dwells apart in its tranquillity, remote, serene, and inaccessible. And this, the naked countenance of earth, on which I gaze, even these primeval mountains teach the adverting mind. The glaciers creep like snakes that watch their prey. From their far fountains, slow rolling on, there many a precipice frost and the sun in scorn of mortal power have piled, dome, pyramid and pinnacle, a city of death, distinct with many a tower and wall impregnable of beaming ice. Yet not a city, but a flood of ruin is there, that from the boundaries of the sky rolls its perpetual stream. Vast pines are strewing its destined path, or in the mangled soil, branchless and shattered stand, the rocks drawn down from yon remotest waste, have overthrown the limits of the dead and living world, never to be reclaimed. The dwelling place of insects, beasts and birds become its spoil, their food and their retreat forever gone. So much of life and joy is lost. The race of man flies far in dread, his work and dwelling vanish, like smoke before the tempest stream, and their place is not known. Below, vast caves shine in the rushing torrent's restless gleam, which from those secret chasms in tumult welling meet in the vale, and one majestic river, the breath and blood of distant lands, forever rolls its loud waters to the ocean waves, breathes its swift vapours to the circling air. Mont Blanc yet gleams on high, the power is there, the still and solemn power of many sights and many sounds, and much of life and death. In the calm darkness of the moonless nights, in the lone glare of day, the snows descend upon that mountain. None beholds them there, nor when the flakes burn in the sinking sun, or the starbeams dart through them. Winds contend silently there, and heap the snow with breath rapid and strong, but silently. Its home the voiceless lightning in these solitudes keeps innocently, and light vapour broods over the snow. The secret strength of things which governs thought, and to the infinite dome of heaven is as a law inhabits thee. And what were thou, and earth, and stars, and sea, if to the human's mind's imaginings silence and solitude were vacancy? That's a piece of writing that feels like it was carved out of the rock itself. There's a relentless driving momentum to Shelley's verse here that mimics the very hydraulic force he is describing. Notice the opening lines, the everlasting universe of things flows through the mind. Immediately he establishes a connection between the internal world of the poet and the external world of geology. But the external world is the aggressor here, rolls its rapid waves. It's not a passive landscape waiting to be painted, it's an active force crashing into the human consciousness. I want you to focus on the image of the ravine of Arve. He calls it an awful scene. Now in the Romantic era, awful meant full of awe, something that strikes you with its magnitude. It's dark, deep, it's a place where power in likeness of the Arve comes down. This is one of the most striking metaphors in Romantic poetry. He equates the physical force of the rushing water with an abstract concept of power. It bursts through the mountains like the flame of lightning. There is a violence here, a shattering energy. This fits so perfectly with our theme of geological and hydrological force. The water is not just water, it's a chisel, a hammer, a weapon of the earth. Shelley also mentions the pines as the giant brood of pines around thee clinging. Even the trees are struggling here. They're clinging to the ravine, holding on for dear life against the erosion and the wind. He calls them children of elder time. There's a sense of ancient history, of a timescale that dwarfs our own human 50-year plans or our daily schedules. These trees partake in an old and solemn harmony with the wind. It's a conversation between the vegetation and the atmosphere that has been going on long before we arrived and will continue long after we are gone. And finally, look at that phrase, robes some unsculpted image. The waterfall covers something that has not been carved by human hands. It's raw. In our modern world, and specifically in the poem of mine I will share shortly, we are often dealing with the sculpted, the managed forest, the carved statue, the reservoir. But Shelley reminds us of the unsculpted, the chaotic core of the world that refuses to be tamed. This is the ultimate exposure. Standing on the edge of that ravine, Shelley is exposed not just to the elements, to the spray and the wind, but to the terrifying realization of nature's autonomy. It is an elegy for our own significance in a way. By celebrating the wildness of Mont Blanc, he is accepting that humanity is just a spectator, standing on the brink, watching the water burst and rave. Now it's time to share one of my own pieces, taken from Cumbria in verse, Lakes to Fells in poetry. While Shelley was looking at the Alps, a landscape of almost pure, untouched wildness, my poem looks at a landscape that is a complicated hybrid of the wild and the industrial. I want to take you to Cumbria, to the Lake District, and in particular to Grizedale Forest. Now, Grizedale is a fascinating place because it's a working forest. It's a plantation. It's filled with Sitka spruce planted in rows, destined to be cut down for timber. It's a landscape imposed upon the earth. But beneath those trees, the ancient geology remains. The glaciers that carved the valleys thousands of years ago left their mark, and the water, the beck, still follows gravity regardless of where the Forestry Commission plants its trees. Grizedale is also famous for its sculptures. Artists have placed wooden and stone sculptures throughout the woods, leaving them to the elements. Over time, these sculptures rot. They're reclaimed by the moss and the damp. So you have this three-way tension: the ancient geological land, the regimented industrial forest, and the decaying human art. My poem, Grizedale Forest, tries to capture the feeling of walking through this layered landscape in February when the winter is hard and the water is heavy. In this poem, I want you to listen for the contrast between the geometric regiments of the trees and the shivering force of the water. The poem moves from the bottom of the valley, near the stream, up through the dense, dark plantation, past the rotting sculptures, and finally breaks out onto the high granite crag where the trees stop. It's a journey from the enclosed, managed dark into the exposed, blinding light. It's about the failure of our attempts to control nature and how, in the end, the wind and the rock always win. So here is Grizedale Forest. The beck runs heavy with February's hydraulic weight, scouring the trough where the glacier once passed, water finding their hairline fracture the slate, a constant shivering force against the hill. Here the Sitka spruce stands in geometric regiments, green walls planted for the sow, a 50-year crop. I walk the fire road, a scar of grey sediments, beneath a canopy that hoards the winter dark. I pass a wooden totem softening into brown rot, art surrendering to the moss and the bracket fungus, a carved face losing its line, a forgotten thought reclaimed by the damp breath of the forest floor. The wind shears hard against the timberline, testing the root plates for the lever point of failure, the engineering of the trunk, the needle's spine, trembling under the pressure of the gale. Up on the crag, the forestry map runs out of ink. The plantation halts, its dark grid lost to the light. I stand exposed upon the granite brink, scoured by the air on the open, bone-white height. Let's break this down, starting with the water. The first stanza speaks of February's hydraulic weight. I wanted to move away from the idea of water as something gentle or trickling. In the Cumbrian winter, water is heavy. It has mass. It is a machine. The word hydraulic suggests pressure, industry and power. It's scouring the trough where the glacier once passed. This links the present moment, the rushing stream, to deep geological time. The water is doing exactly what the ice did 10,000 years ago, eroding, shaping, finding the hairline fracture. It's a constant shivering force. That shivering isn't cold, it's vibration. It's the energy of the earth working against itself. Then we move into the man-made section, the geometric regiments of the Sitka spruce. This is the tension I wanted to explore. These trees aren't growing wildly, they are green walls planted for the sower. They're a crop just like wheat, but on a 50-year cycle. Walking the fire road, you feel small but also trapped. The canopy hoards the winter dark. There's a claustrophobia in a plantation forest that is very different from ancient woodland. It feels imposed. It feels like a grid placed over a chaotic landscape. The third stanza addresses entropy and art. I mention a wooden totem softening into brown rot. Grizedale is full of these. You see a piece of art that was crisp and defined 10 years ago, now becoming a forgotten thought. The bracket fungus and the moss are reclaiming it. This is the damp breath of the forest floor, digesting our human efforts to decorate nature. There's a melancholy here, but also a rightness. The art is surrendering, it's returning to the cycle of carbon and decay. It reminds us that our marks on the world, whether they are sculptures or poems, are temporary. In the fourth stanza, we feel the wind. The wind is shearing against the timberline. I use engineering language here, root plates. Lever point of failure, engineering of the trunk. Even biology is a form of engineering. The trees are structures designed to withstand wind, but the gale is testing them, looking for weakness. It's a battle of physics. The trembling of the needles is the vibration of that tension. Finally, the poem ends with release. Up on the crag, the forestry maps run out of ink. I love the idea that our administrative control over the land, our maps, our grids, our ownership, has a physical limit. The plantation simply stops because the granite is too hard, the slope too steep. The dark grid is lost to the light. The speaker stands exposed. We're back to the sublime, back to Shelley's unsculpted image. Standing on the bone-white height, scoured by the air, there is no more protection, no more commercial forestry, no more art, just the rock and the wind. It's a moment of clarity, stripping away the imposed layers to reveal the raw bone of the earth beneath. Now it's on to our discussion segment. For our discussion segment this week, I want to pivot to a topic that might seem distant from glaciers and pine forests, but I believe shares a strange resonance with the theme we've just explored. We've been talking about grids, the geometric regiments of the spruce trees, the maps that run out of ink. In our creative lives, we inhabit another kind of grid, the digital grid of social media, specifically Instagram, and how we use it to share and promote poetry. There's a profound irony in using a platform driven by algorithms, speed, and visual distraction to promote an art form that is about slowing down, deep listening, and complexity. When I take a photo of a poem to post on Instagram, I'm often struck by the tension between the medium and the message. I'm trying to fit a hydraulic weight, a shivering force, into a 1080 by 1080 pixel square. I'm trying to plant a wild thing in a digital plantation. So how do we navigate this? How do we use these tools without letting them scour away the nuance of the work? If you're a poet or a writer trying to share your work online, think about the texture of your posts. In the poem, I describe the scar of grey sediments and the damp breath of the forest floor. Social media is often very shiny, very flat. To cut through that, we need to bring the texture of the physical world into the digital space. Don't just post the text of the poem on a white background. Photograph the book on the moss. Let the rain blur the ink slightly. Record yourself reading the poem while the wind is blowing in the microphone. Let the entropy, the messiness of the real world, invade the pristine grid of the app. Furthermore, think about the concept of exposure we discussed. The algorithm wants consistency, it wants the geometric regiments. It wants you to post at the same time with the same hashtags, like a crop of timber planted for the saw. But the best art and the most resonant posts often come from the crag, the place where the map runs out of ink. Don't be afraid to post something that breaks the pattern. Share the failures, the rotten totems of drafts that didn't work. Share the silence. If you're promoting a book, don't just sell the product, sell the atmosphere from which it grew. If your book is about the coast, let us hear the sea. If it's about the city, let us hear the traffic. We must treat these platforms not as the destination, but as the fire road, a path through the woods that leads people to the work itself. The likes and the follows are just the bracket fungus growing on the art. They're not the art itself. The core of what we do remains the constant shivering force of the language. We use the grid, but we must not become the grid. We must remain the water, finding the fracture, the wind, testing the timberline. Use Instagram to signal where the wildness is, but remind your readers that to truly experience it, they must put down the phone and walk out onto the bone-white height. They must leave the digital plantation and encounter the poem on its own terms, in the quiet, unmediated space of their own minds. Now that you've listened to one of my poems, I'd love to hear from you. If there's a poem you'd like me to feature as a guest poem in a future episode, please email me at oldencaro78@gmail.com. That's oldencaro78@gmail.com. It could be a classic, something modern, or even a personal favourite that means a lot to you. This way, the podcast becomes a shared journey. So thank you for joining me on this journey. Until next time, may you find the poetry in the everyday, and I look forward to speaking to you again very soon.